Now I'm going to predict all 133 teams in Division One FBS football, and it's no particular order either. Oklahoma to me is like at best is old. I'm going to go over best case scenario and worst case scenario, or even exact record for some of these teams here. Okay, best case scenario for Oklahoma based on that schedule 11-1 or 10-2, but at worst aim for. I would highly doubt it, but you never know because maybe the 9-3 at worst too. I don't know. Baylor 10-2, 7-5 or 6. I mean, 10-2 at best, 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. Texas is 10-2. I could totally see that, but I could also see them going down to 7-5 or 8-4. Let's be clear. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt, even based on the past history with all that talent, and they underachieve. I'm calling that. I call my shot there. I know some people might not be happy with that, but look, it's the truth. No Big 12 title since 2009, which was the title game in 2009, like football championship game in 2009 against Alabama, and have not recovered since. I mean, it's the truth. Now Texas Tech, 10-2 at best, 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. Kansas State, 10-2 at best, which I could totally see, but I could also see them going down lower, like 7-5 or 6-6. There's no question they're a bowl game team. Kansas, maybe 9-3 or 10-2 at best, which I might be stretching it on some of these records here. And it does require improvement, of course, but at worst 6-6 or 7-5. Oklahoma State, I just don't really know what to think of them. So 9-3 or 8-4 at best. And at worst 6-6 or 5-7. I know it's an easier schedule, but they have a lot of new pieces. UCF 8-4 or 7-5 at best. Then 5-7 or 4-8 at worst. I just don't know what to think. Same thing goes for TCU on 8-4 or 7-5 at best, 4-8 or 5-7 at worst. Cincinnati maybe 8 wins or 8-4 or 7-5 at best, and 3-9 or 4-8 at worst. I just don't know what to think of them. And maybe it's stretching it a bit on best case scenario. Now BYU 8-4 or 7-5 at best potentially, and 4-8 or 3-9 at worst. Houston is 8-4. 7-5 at best, which I might be stretching it on 8-4, so maybe 6-6 is more realistic instead of 8-4. But worse, like 4-8 or 5-7. Now West Virginia, I don't have high expectations. I mean 7-5 at best, but at worst 3-9 or 2-10. Yeah, and Iowa State 7-5 or 6-6 at best, but 2-10 at worst. Alabama, to me, they're either 12-0 at best or 10-2 at worst. LSU 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 7-5 or 8-4 at worst. Ole Miss 10-2 or 9-3 at best, and 6-6 or 7-5 at worst. Arkansas 9-3 or 8-4 at best, and 6-6 or 7-5 at worst. Texas A&M at 9-3 or 8-4 at best, but 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Who would have ever thought Texas A&M was not going to a bowl game last year? That was certainly not me. I mean, Mississippi State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, and 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Auburn 8-4 at best, maybe 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. But I think 6-6 is more possible now because they got that Michigan State quarterback, Payne Thorne. So now Georgia, to me, it's either 12-0 or 11-1. Yeah, it's easier, but they have to avoid trap games, of course. Tennessee 10-2 or 11-1 at best, 7-5 at worst. South Carolina 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 or 7-5 at worst. Kentucky 9-3 or 8-4 at best, and 6-6 at worst. Florida 7-5 or 8-4 at best, 4-8 or 5-7 at worst. If there's no who would ever thought they would beat Utah, and then pretty much didn't play. They started the season well, but then they fell off the cliff and ended 6-7. Missouri 7-5 or 8-4 at best, and at worst like 4-8 or 5-7. Vanderbilt 5-7 or 2 at best, and 2-10 or 3-9 at worst. Michigan 12-0 or 11-1 at best, 9-3 or 8-4 at worst. Ohio State, 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 8-4 at worst. Penn State, 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 8-4 at worst. Maryland, 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Michigan State, 8-4, which is a maybe not type of deal now with the transfer portal. And granted, I don't know what's going to happen from here on the transfer portal. Or 7-5 at best, and 5-7 or 4-8 at worst. Rutgers 6-6 or 7-5 at best, 3-9 at worst. Indiana 6-7 or 5-7 at best, 2-10 or 3-9 at worst. Wisconsin 10-2 or 11-1 at best, 7-5 or 8-4 at worst. Iowa 10-2 at best, 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. Minnesota 8-4 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Purdue, I just don't have a clue. I mean, 8-4 or 9-3 at best, maybe 4-8 or 5-7 at worst. Nebraska 8-4 or 9-3 at best, 3-9 or 2-10 at worst. I honestly don't know what to do with these first-year head coaches, to be honest. In Illinois, 7-5 or 8-4 at best, but that might be stretching it. Maybe 7 wins is more realistic. I mean, and 4-8 at worst. Northwestern 5-7 or 4-8 at best, 2-10 at worst. Florida State 12-0 or 11-1 at best, 9-3 or 8-4 at worst. Clemson 12-0 or 11-1 at best, 9-3 or 8-4 at worst. Duke 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. North Carolina 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Pitt 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. NC State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Miami, Florida 9-3 or 8-4 at best, and 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Louisville 8-4 at best, 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Wake Forest 8-4 or 7-5 at best, 4-8 at worst. Syracuse 7-5 or 6-6 at best, 3-9 or 2-10 at worst. Virginia Tech 7-5 or 6-6 at best, 3-9 or 2-10 at worst. Virginia 6-6 or 5-7 at best, 3-9 or 2-10 at worst. Georgia Tech 6-6 or 5-7 at best, which Georgia Tech might be stretching in with the bowl. It's only depending on certain games here. And 2-10 at best. Boston College 6-6 or 5-7 at best, but 2-10 at worst. Washington 12-0 or 11-1 at best, 9-3 or 8-4 at worst. Oregon 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 8-4 or 9-3 at worst. USC 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 8-4 or 9-3 at worst. Which, yeah, I said 8-4 because you got to look at the back half of the schedule. It's harder than the front. They should start 6-0. But even then, after that, and you have to improve that defense. Oregon State 11-1 or 10-2 at best, 8-4 or 7-5 at worst. Utah 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 7-5 at worst. UCLA 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 at worst. Washington State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 at worst. Arizona 7-5 or 6-6 at best, 3-9 at worst. Arizona State 7-5 or 6-6 at best, 3-9 at worst. Stanford 5-7 at best, 2-10 at worst. Colorado 5-7 or 6-6, which I don't know what to think about Colorado with a lot of transfers. And 2-10 or 1-11 at worst. I highly doubt 1-11 is going to happen, but I'm just saying that is a true possibility. Cal 5-7 or 4-8 at best, 2-10 at worst. Boise State 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Air Force 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. San Diego State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. San Jose State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 6-6 or 5-7 at worst. Fresno State 7-5 or 8-4 at best, 4-8 at worst. Wyoming 7-5 or 8-4 at best, and 3-9 at worst. Utah State 7-5 at best and 3-9 or at worst. UNLV, I just don't know what to think of them. Maybe 6-6 or 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. Hawaii 6-6 or 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. Nevada 6-6 or 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. Colorado State 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. New Mexico 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. UTSA 9-3 or 10-2 at best. 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. UAB 10-2 or 9-3 at best. 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. Tulane 10-2 or 9-3 at best. 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. FAU Florida Atlantic University 10-2 or 9-3 at best. 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. North Texas 9-3 at best. 5-7 or 6-6 at worst. Memphis 8-4 or 9-3 at best. 6-6 at worst. SMU 8-4 at best, 5-7 or 4-8 at worst. East Carolina 7-5 or 8-4 at best, 3-9 at worst. Tulsa 6-6 or 5-7 at best, 2-10 at worst. Rice 5-7 at best, 1-11 or 2-10 at worst. Navy 5-7 at best, 1-11 or 2-10 at worst. Charlotte 4-8 at best, 1-11 at worst. Temple 4-8 at best, 1-11 at worst. South Florida 3-9 at best, 1-11 at worst. Yeah. South Florida is just that bad. Sorry. Somebody has to be that. Now, Western Kentucky, I would say 10-2 may be their ceiling. 8-4 or 7-5 at worst. Liberty 9-3 or 8-4 at best. 6-6 at worst. Middle Tennessee State 8-4 at best. 6-6 at worst. Jacksonville State 8-4 at best. 5-4-8 or 5-7 at worst. New Mexico State 8-4 at best, 4-8 or 5-7 at worst. Sam Houston State 8-4 or 7-5 at best, 4-8 at worst. UTEP 8-4 or 7-5 at best, 4-8 at worst. Louisiana Tech 4-8 or 5-7 at best, 1-11 at worst. Florida International University 3-9 at best, 1-11 or 0-12 at worst. Yeah, there's a possibility for them. James Madison 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 7-5 or 6-6 at worst. Coastal Carolina 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Marshall 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 5-7 at worst. Appalachian State 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 5-7 at worst. Georgia State 6-6 at best, 3-9 at worst. Georgia Southern 5-7 or 4-8 at best, 1-11 at worst. Old Dominion 3-9 at best or 4-8 at best, really 1-11 at worst. South Alabama 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Troy 9-3 at best, 6-6 or 5-7 at best. At worst. Southern Miss 8-4 at best, 5-7 at worst. Louisiana 8-4 or 7-5 at best, 5-7 at worst. UL Monroe 3-9 or 4-8 at best, 1-11 at worst. Texas State 4-8 at best, 0-12 or 1-11 at worst. Arkansas State 3-9 at best or 4-8 at best, really 1-11 at worst. Ohio 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Buffalo 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 6-6 at worst. Miami, Ohio 7-5 at best, 3-9 at worst. Bowling Green 7-5 at best, 3-9 at worst. Kansas State 6-6 at best, 2-10 at worst. Akron 3-9 at best, 0-12 or 1-11 at worst. Toledo 8-4 or 9-3 at best, 5-7 at worst. Western Michigan 8-4 at best, 4-8 at worst. Eastern Michigan 8-4 at best, 4-8 at worst. Ball State 5-7 or 6-6 at best, 1-11 or 2-10 at worst. Central Michigan 5-7 or 6-6 at best, 1-11 or 2-10 at worst. Northern Illinois 3-9 or 4-8 at best, 1-11 at worst. Army 10-2 or 9-3 at best, 5-7 or 4-8 at worst. Notre Dame 12-0 or 11-1 at best, 8-4 or 9-3 at worst. UConn 9-3 or 8-4 at best, 5-7 at worst. UMass 5-7 at best, possibly. Maybe 4-8 is more realistic. 1-11 or 0-12 at worst. That's all 133 teams right there. And I don't know what to do with some of these two teams in their conferences either. It's either gonna. That's kind of why I kind of accommodate for potential growing pains. And I also kind of looked at the roster beforehand to see what they have and coming back, and as well as the schedule here. Anyways, if you like this content, like and subscribe. See you guys later. 5 subscribers. We're on the road to it. Let's go.